So welcome everybody to this session about data management terminologies called From Challenge to Community Recommendations. Is that okay for the technical staff to start? Okay. So this session must be the most interactive possibly. So I encourage you to speak when you want. All the staff in red will circulate with microphone. So the objective is to have feedback, and I will explain you why. We try to write a paper on this aspect and this challenge and propose recommendation, and indeed, as it will be after understood by the RDA community, we want to broadly open the door to everybody. So, first I want to acknowledge the countries that we receive us. And celebrate the first Australian who was traditional lands we meet, and we pay our respect to their elder past and present. You know now very well all the principles, the guiding principles of IDA, so I'm happy to remind again and again, we are advocates of this principle of openness, community-driven consensus, non-profit and technology-neutral harmonization and inclusivity that could drive all our work. The session objective, it's three interactive components. The first one is the introduction and the survey with Mentimeter. We need for that the participation of all the attendees, so please prepare your computer or your phone or your phone. And we will work on a score of the severity for obstacles from 1 to 5 in all of your contexts. So what is important is there is no bad or good response. The response will be what you think about your own work and your own world. Secondly, we will have four people that will stay here for a round table, but answering first on several topics, but the goal is also to have reaction immediately by the room. And after, discussion will permit to identify stakeholders, to address specific obstacles, to connect challenge to possible mitigation strategies, and to shape next step for the collaborative paper and the development of a checklist. So the wrap-up will also be the occasion to re-invite all of you to participate to the paper after. We will have paper sprint, and the paper is linked in the notes. So for all people that are online, I would like to suggest also to you to give your name as well as people that are here in the notes if you want to be recontacted and to be included in the future work on this session. So this session is focused on assessing the severity of terminological obstacles that we will define for a better quality of data management in your context, and to see how the context play a role for all of these impacts and effect of obstacle. So all P23 and P25 attendees are invited to be co-author, and the link to the notes is here, but also available. So you see first that the paper is draft, and we have to change things in it, but taken in account the first plenary, we have also the content of the first P23 plenary in the paper. And here is the link to go to the notes. So I invite you to take the QR code and to log in if you can. I'll let you do. When it's okay for everybody, I will continue. So that's okay. Everybody is ready. Let's go. So, introduction of the work. Despite an increase in the availability of proposed definition for many data ecosystems, And we know that they are now federated in CODATA, in RDA, and in other assembly. There remains an urgent need to harmonize data management terminologies that support FAIR principles and actively improve the quality of data management. But what we want to do in this session is not to define new vocabularies or to prioritize one definition or one other, but so we will not today in the paper provide definitions, but we want to propose a strategy to mitigate these issues in various communities, and depending on the context and their means, it is not always the same way. So we use the 5-level severity scale for minor disruption to research determination, inspired by established risk assessment framework. And the approach aims to link terminological obstacles directly to consequence on project, such time, quality, compliance, and reproducibility. So for that, the 5 level is something often commonly accepted, from negligible to critical, with 3 intermediate states, low, moderate, and high. So the negligible, the definition is the obstacle cause only minor inconvenience, like slight misunderstanding, quickly clarified. The impact is a minimal disruption, workflow continues almost unaffected. And we can use the analogy of a typo in a document that does not change its meaning. The low level, the definition is the obstacle introduces some ambiguity or inefficiency requiring clarification. The impact often is a small delay, but work progresses without major rework. And the analogy is a mistranslation in a term that needs checking but does not impact the meeting. The moderate level, the obstacle, you will have to apply these levels on your own context. So the obstacle generates significant confusion or divergent interpretations across whole discipline and or language. So the impact requires discussions on harmonization, and the progression of the project is slowed. The analogy could be different groups use archiving to mean storage or preservation, leading to rework or to do other meetings. High impact is defined by the obstacle that block alignment on responsibilities or processes in a critical part of the data lifecycle. The impact is a substantial delay, additional cost, or risk to data quality and compliance. So the analogy could be an unclear distinction between data steward and data owner, for instance, leads to gaps in accountability for fair compliance. And the critical one, the obstacle halts workflow and makes collaboration impossible until resolved. So the impact is a severe disruption, a risk of project failure, and the result becomes non-reproducible. The analogy is something like a lexical gaps or conflicting terms or conflicting roles definition, for instance, across infrastructure, prevent agreements on data governance. So we have to assess in each context, it's from the Alison Specht et al. Paper, 9 sources of confusion. We have determined them as disciplinary divergence. So you have same terms, different meaning across field. Geographical variations, same term, but different meaning across countries or region. The idiomatic usage, imported terms with context-specific meaning deal on lead an ambiguity. That could be due to geographical variations, but also other ones. A polysemy, so you have one term or concept, but multiple meanings, and another ambiguity is also due to that. The linguistic confusion, so you have multiple terms for the same meaning. So we can use one or one other, but people don't understand one or one other. The vagueness, so you have an unclear meaning. For instance, when you have an administrative unit, it can differ in names, nature across a region that don't have the same size, for instance, and that can play a role in the data discrepancy and the analysis. The lexical gaps with concepts without equivalent in the targeted language that often arrive between French and English, for instance. But I think it's for all language. Fuzziness with nuanced or evolving terminologies that are evolving also in case of geographical variation from one statement common at the beginning to two divergent meaning. And the last but not least, adoption barriers with new terms not yet understood or widely used by the community. 9 terms, 9 ways to analyze your context. Will we arrive to do that now? So to fix the ideas, I invite Alison Specht, that is the main author of the paper, to give some examples, and after we will have an exercise for your context.
Well, depends on how much time I've got, an hour, a whole room. Yes, I should pay attention to what has been written here, so I should. Okay, so when I've got to press harder, don't I? Do you go this way for the next one? Ah, there it is. Good. I led the paper. I did write a lot of it, but I led the paper, and that we refer to, and it was an examination of a research project that had run over quite a few years across the world, with participants across the world, and very much from different disciplines. So it was a multidisciplinary, not quite transdisciplinary, but a multidisciplinary project. And we discovered that everything, as many projects do, that everything wasn't quite going smoothly all the time. And there were several, so we thought we'd retrospectively examine why this might have been so, and we found quite often it was pure communication. And we were doing a data project, that was exactly the point, so it is relevant to here, but in fact this sort of problem is relevant in all sorts of science that now depends to some extent on data collection, data analysis, modelling, and of course prediction science. And for that, you often need a very high technology programmer, you need someone who's keen on data, and you're not going to find them in any one place. So I would argue that what we're going to talk today about can be related to all sorts of things. For example, in Queensland, at the University of Queensland, there's an eminent international researcher who deals with this sort of problem and how it affects conservation of biodiversity. And he's written quite a lot of papers on that matter, as has a man called Chowdhury. So it can really make a difference to whether you're saving a species that's going extinct. A bird, an animal, a snail. For our project, it was about remote sensing, modelling, and deep learning, and deep learning, really, and socioeconomic variables put together with spatial analysis information. So we've got a few examples here, and Romain was really the driver for some of these nine terms, and this was in itself a different discipline field. So the linguistic field talks a lot. Lots of language in a linguistic paper. They're never short papers. So we had a bit of effort, kind of extracting some of it. So some examples here. I particularly remember the polysemic term example here, experiment and run. That was a particular problem that I had with the deep learning specialists. And I'm a trained scientist who works on a lab bench or works out in the field and sets control and reference sites, and I use experiment. I thought if I run a stats package, I preserve my code often so I can rerun my stats. However, she used the word experiment. And we spent 10 solid meetings with me going, what are you talking about? You haven't got a control, you haven't got a reference, where are your tests? She used the term experiment, and talking to many other deep learning people, that's quite a common word, but I didn't understand it at all. So that was mea culpa. On the other hand, maybe it was her too. Of course, we then had linguistic confusion, some examples there, prediction versus estimation. It's quite different in some fields, and precision. Of course, more obvious is things like the definition of terms that government departments use in different countries to add up population data, for example. Census data, census tract. Now, I think of a tract as a long line. A tract in some countries, USA, is what I would call a cadastral unit even. Census sector is something we use here, or a block, which was used in Japan. So when you're doing multi-country projects, linguistic confusion can easily arise, and you say to the remote sensors, oh, we'll have this and this and this in this country, and it's all just an area on the land. So, it can really slow things down. What I haven't got here in this table is the severity index, and that is quite important. Do I have the example? Yes, on the next slide, I'll press harder. I'll press this one. Okay. On the next slide, we have an example of ecoregion, and this actually stopped the project. This was quite serious because ecoregion is a common term that we use in ecology and geographic work. But the deep learning people, and this particular group was in France, versus the other deep learning group, which was in Brazil. So you've got a difference there. They worked for months, assuming that ecoregion was something completely different from what the ecologists who were doing this, pulling out the socioeconomic data, was thinking of. So that was actually a very severe effect that wasn't discovered till the group re-met again some months later. So frequency of meetings was important, and discovered that was important. Similarly, in the case of the deep learning and the socioeconomic variables, all these terms like wave were accepted for other people. It was the same as a round and same as a repeat instance, but completely accepted by one group, and not the other group didn't even use that term, never heard of it. So there are some really mild things that you could deal with conversations, if you have regular conversations. But there were other things that really ended up, oh, I've spent 6 months on this, I'm not going to go back, we can't afford the time, we've used all that money up, and you have to abandon that particular line of research. So that's a serious one. Of course, today, last one, today we're in an International Data Week, a wonderful, and I hope everyone's had as good a time as I have. One of the things this group is doing is creating pathways and new ideas and innovations. Someone's got to adopt those innovations, and that takes time to diffuse. Parallel is well described in marketing, but that's exactly what it is. So we think, okay, a data management plan, that's old hat. We're now beginning to call it something else. Some countries don't even have, and quite large ones, well-established, well-developed countries, don't even have that term in their language, in their lexicon. So that's something that is quite surprising, but do not forget that there are regions, peoples who just have not picked up on these matters. Perhaps they don't feel they're relevant, so you have to have respect for it, but perhaps it's just that it hasn't quite reached the people. Sometimes the researchers pick it up, but then it's got to get into kind of more government parlance or something like that. So we certainly came up with that. And checklist, computational notebook. That was a classic, they were two terms that are not equivalent, but were pretty well equivalent and were not accurate, but that was the best we could do, given the state of play in one particular country versus another. So assumptions are very dangerous. Anyway, I think that's probably enough from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfectly in time, Alison, so that's great. So now I will explain to you what we would like to do in several contexts. So the work I've started in other network, but we would like to make a kind of relation between this severity scale in several contexts and try to find what are the proxy, what are the way to identify solvability of these issues. Is it a lack of governance in a community? Is it a way to have more data stewards that could solve, or other solutions like having workshop and regular meeting on for instance, terminologies convergence? There are several options. All things can be proposed. That must also come from you. I have cited some ideas that were done by peoples very diverse from diverse community, and some solutions are adapted for several communities, but not others. So after, it will be a kind of checklist that we want to build, but this checklist must be adoptable, and to be adoptable, she must be adaptable. So the idea, don't see that as something that is fixed. The issues are placed here as an example, but it could be completely different considering one context or one other. In fact, we would like to have this kind of graphic for lots of different case studies and to see what is major, what is minor, and why it is major or minor. And after the challenge, the possible solution, we propose this checklist in 4 steps. First, identifying the gaps, indeed. After, align what we can align, embed things, and sustain them for the long term to ensure that the level of science and results is guaranteed. And for that, indeed, we also need to identify the context, but also the stakeholders that can do something. And that's also an exercise that we will do. The collection of role and actions that have to be placed in this matrix could also change between the context. So you have the context X to show you that it's not an example, it's something completely virtual, but you have to adapt it. And that will be the result part of the paper. And I propose now to you, to everybody, a short exercise. So for that, I let you scanning the Mentimeter code now. You have also the code 44064207 to be inserted in the Mentimeter address or welcome page. And I let you, again, 1 minute. And you will see that if you didn't have time to scan, on the upper part of the page, you have also the code. So you can log in and catch people if you are not online now. So, first question. In your area, what problem arise from the use of or understanding of data management terms? You have heard the presentation of Alison. You have heard also the definition that I have cared. So here I have the first answer, Data Steward. So I think it's Data Steward missing. Archive, data sharing is a problem that is arising. Is it linked to to terminologies? Data manager, available, metadata. So all these keywords will also help us to try to categorize what we have. So data steward is a word that is coming again. Machine actionability, indeed, if we have several terms, the computer will never choose one term or one other. If we don't have the definition that they are homonym, synonym, there is a polysemy or not. So it must be also identified for machine actionability. So you have confusion, duplication, AI ready, preservation, intellectual properties. That is also interesting. Versioning. I have seen during the versioning session that there were a lot of issues or discrepancy between definitions between peoples. So which term to use? Okay, I think we can go to the next question. Thank you for this. So I want now to know who you are, just because it will also help us to identify which context we are, in which context we are, and how we can integrate the result of the session in the paper. So for that, you have to click on the main part of the, so this one is generic, it's just to identify which kind of public you have. So I see that there are 10 responses. I don't know why I don't see the response. 14, 17 response. Perhaps because it's a multiple choice, so people will press H to show response. Next, perhaps. No, something should happen, but I don't know how to validate. There is a 25 response, 26. So, press H. Yes, this one. Mm-hmm. It's like the gift under the tree when it arrives. So no research funders, but there are other parts that are well represented, and it's very, very equilibrated between research provider, research community, data service provider, data stewards. That's great. And also policymakers, coordination fora and standard bodies. Coordination fora, we could all check it, but it's your choice. So, okay, I propose to go to the next question about your country. So it's a cloud of words, so we can validate the show of the answer directly, I think. Sweden, Ireland, Australia. Australia is the main one, that's great. Switzerland, well represented. New Zealand, Singapore, Italy, USA, Germany, Iran. Aotearoa, where is it? Netherlands. Okay. Philippines, US, Japan. So we have a good representation on worldwide. I see South Africa, New Zealand also. Do I miss something? Poland, Finland. Great. We can go to the next question. Your disciplinary. Again, we can validate the answer directly. We let people writing, and indeed biology is written faster than computer science. It's longer. Microbiology, training, environment, agriculture, digital service, data stewardship, physics, climate scientist, ecology, agriculture, security, geoinformatics, social science, veterinary medicine, statistics, that is also transversal, mathematics. So all of these contexts can be taken separately, but also they have some commons, I guess. And we see computer science is the winner. Why? Not surprising. Okay, thank you very much for all this response. And we are 35 participants now. That's great. Good base for the next step. So we continue on the next question, please. Thank you very much for your assistance. Which roles are involved in the data life cycle within your organization or project? Are you alone? Or are you hundreds of people working on data? What are the roles? Can you define them by titles that you have? Is it only PhD? That could arrive sometime. And so, only the lonely. That's nice. And I don't understand why, but only one person responded.
Not quite sure.
DMP, metadata, vocabulary, so that's the target, data steward, data architect, software architect, marketing coordinator. Oh. Not, so sales leads. What is sales leads? What said that? Yeah?
People who manage sales or sell things or find people to buy things.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. That's so you lead with lots of data indeed. Okay, so there are lots of response now. I think that's interesting, and often we don't think all the roles that can be linked to data that could have different contexts, use different vocabularies. For me, that's really interesting to see all this response. We have 27 response now, but we have 36 people that have answered. So please continue to fill all the things. We need all your data. And I think that at this step we can go further with the next question, please. What are your main related to data activities? So here it's a multiple choice question, so we can show the answer directly. At this step, nobody answered, but perhaps it's an open question again. Oh yes, it's an open question. So collect metadata, gathering data, early career researcher, data wrangling, research, data curation, data analytics, analyzing data, data protection, research data management policy implementation, data management plan support, data analysis. How can I go back? Can we try to group response with the space to see how it is working? We have 28 response, so 7 response related to data curation, 5 response to data collection, 5 response to data protection, 7 to data analysis. We could detail that by clicking on the arrows that are on the right side for each response. For instance, data protection, you have data sovereignty 2 times, DMP support or DMP. Okay for this group and for the others. Policy creation, policy DMP guidance training for policy development, data management policy development, RDM policy implementation, policy creating. Interesting also aspect. for vocabularies because it's linked to law, on rules, training, so RDM training, transformation. What is transformation? Change. Yeah, okay. So for data sharing, data sharing and chasing researcher to do open science. Okay. Metadata, collect metadata, and all the new response that are here, also to be classified. We will go to the next one now, please. They are working more than me over there. So, what are your roles in data management activities? Now it's sectorial response. You can respond several of them. But to know what you are doing exactly, most are researchers at this step, but only 5 respond. So we will wait a bit. The only data owner is not well recognized. Ah, yes, there is one data owner. So 21, 22, we have 36 people on the room participating to the survey. 27. So as we can see, researcher and data manager are, with Data Steward, the 3 main. Others is one other, but I can't tell you more about that. So we see that mainly we are all dealing with data. That is interesting also to have the point of view of data custodian, data analyst, that have 2 separate roles, but really well linked. And perhaps we are between this, if we are data steward or data manager, we are between custodians and analysts. That's interesting. So for us, all these contexts are interesting. We can go to the next, please. About any of these activities. So here, it's a bit longer. It's complementary activities with the roles that you had in the precedent slide. So here, for instance, you have metadata specialist that is really focused, perhaps sometime on semantic and things like that, documentation process. The data curator and repository manager that work on repositories, catalogs, or data dictionaries. The quality manager, so the metadata about quality, the quality of data management also. The part policy governance officer, that is not always only a role, but an attribution to data stewards or data managers sometimes. Training skills developers. So we have seen that training was a important part, but perhaps people that have other role will be linked to that. What I didn't say is that we will compare response to see how they are linked together and how certain roles are embedded in others for the analysis. And we have data services specialists with typology for data, service and user services. So, now I know you better. We can go to the next one, please. And thank you again. So, now we will try to assess, considering your context, all that you have described on your role, your disciplinary, your region, will be a way to understand what you are answering now. So the first thing that you have to assess the effect in your story, in your mind, what you have as an experience during your PhD, for instance, or more recently, if you are at the end, or if you have not a researcher career, for instance. So polysemy, it's one term and multiple meaning. I will say that again. So what we can see is that nobody said negligible at this step. That's interesting. Low, minor disruption and critical are not often chosen. But you remember that moderate, that increase the effort. And the height has a major impact on quality. So that could have impact on reproducibility, on the cost of the research, for instance. And for that, I see that even if you are in different contexts, you are converging on the impact and the effect of the polysemy. We will try another term. Second one, please. Fuzziness. So something very vague. It's a crate with something in, more or less well-defined, or more or less well-understood. Or it's a term that is evolving, that don't have the same meaning tomorrow on yesterday. So here again, we have description, we have more critical level. That means that the fuzziness is understood as more problematic than the polysemy at this step. But we have only 23 response, 26. We will arrive to 30. Yes, we can classify fuzziness as more problematic than polysemy. Indeed, that's not taking into account of specific context, because in some time that can be low, minor. So, thank you. We can go to the third term, please. After 9, there is another series of 100. No. So, the third one is synonym confusion. So, you have different terms, but the same meaning. And sometimes you have terms that have polysemy that are part of synonym confusion. So that makes very discrepancy. But we have to consider one term by one term. So synonym confusion, again, we have moderate and high impact that are major. But here, low and minor description is more raising in your experience, indeed. Always we can't say we are representative of all the world of data, but that's only to have a picture, and the broadest picture that we can have is on this kind of assembly. And just one case, say critical. Interesting. 25, make an effort to go to 30. 25, no battery. So we will go to the next one, 26. Yeah, thank you. So next term, please. So rate the maximum effect. Always we talk about maximum effect. I should always remind that. Of synonym confusion. So you have different terms and the same meaning. On research quality in your domain. So if you have different terms but the same meaning, it seems that there are no critical level at this step. Oh, there is one. After, it could depend also to the disciplinary, and it will be interesting to see in detail. So what I wanted to say until we have enhanced response is that we will do this kind of survey also in several communities online to complete the data that we have and to try to have a panel of a more representative panel as possible as it is to publish something that is very various and that can consider solutions that are coming, that are adaptable in the most of the case. So here, that's beautiful flowers. 24 people are continuing to answer, so we only lost 13% of the peoples, less than 30 now. So thank you very much. We can go to the next term. Idiomatic usage. So context specifics or imported terms that have another signification. Idiomatic, you have lots of terms that are idiomatic in local language also, for instance. But in context specific, we use that also because we don't have a term, so we invent one. So for people that could be negligible, minimal effect. And for one, it's critical. So it's more, you have more discrepancy on that. But always, the three main parts are 2, 3, and 4. There is an effect also. We also often choose the center, the middle, than the extreme. So we have this kind of bias that we have to consider. 26. We can go to the next one. For those who have stopped, please, if you can respond to all the others and continue to complete the datasets, that could be perfect. So rate the maximum effect of disciplinary divergence. E-disciplinary, I don't know why I said E. It was a copy and paste, not well done. So same term, different meanings across field. That is arriving a lot in environment, in ecology, for instance, but I guess that in other disciplinaries. So there are more critical aspects. 3, the high major impact is the majority one. So that's really interesting because the profile of this factor, of this effect of this category of obstacle is really different than the others. There is something to think about here. Okay, thank you. We can go further. 27 people are on it. Geographical variations. I think that everybody knows that. Different meanings across regions or countries have a maximum effect on research quality in your domain for you. Negligible, low, moderate, high with major impact on quality, or critical, that the risk, a big risk for your project. I think after, Alison, I will ask you to tell us the story of the boat. No, but you, with the roundtable, you will have the question. Perhaps it will give the willingness to others to tell us other stories like that. So, 24, where are the 2, 3 last that are missing? We can see now that negligible is more important here, moderate is practically nothing, and the 2 major are low and high. That's the first curve that we have on this way. Interesting. 25, 26, perfect, thank you very much. We can go for the next. So, I think that is the last one, or one of the last one. Rate the maximum effect of vagueness. So, unclear or inconsistently used term on research quality in your domain. Vagueness, that's something that is appropriate, but not really well linked. And for instance, in the indicator world, that play a role, big role for us. And I see that it's also the case for 5 persons with critical level, but also negligible for 2. We have 24 response. Thank you very much, because we don't lost a lot of people for a long time now. You are not sleeping, that's good. Thank you very much. After you have to talk instead of me. 25, I think we can go further. Thank you again. I think I will bring you a coffee after. So, rate the maximum effect of lexical gaps. So, no equivalent term in another language or context. So, you have a hole, and you don't know how to say that exactly. So a whole for you, is it critical or is it negligible? Depends of the way you see things. So we have 20, 21 response. Well, it's less important than most of the other things. If you don't have a term, that's not a problem. I'm a bit provocative. 23, again, 2 or 5, moderate. Perhaps I influence the vote of people when I do jokes like that, no? Yeah, perhaps. I must be careful. So, I'd say nothing. So 25, I think that we can go to the next slide. And that's the last one. Adoption barriers. I'm really curious to see what you think about that. If you have terms that are adequate, that don't have the other issues, but that are not adopted, what is the issue? What is the level of risk for your project? Critical. So that's something that is different from all the others. This aspect is to be considered also. And we have 23 people, 24, 20, 26. Oh, as you can see, the conclusion of our 9 term vote for 26, between 26 and 30 peoples, is that we have completely different profile on the appreciation of the risk. It's a personal appreciation. It's linked to your context. So it's not very scientific on a large number, but the profile are different. That's a fact. Next slide, please. So now I will ask to you, and as I know that you don't remember all your answer before, to classify the level of each problem. I don't have the last one. Why I didn't put the last one is just because on the interface I had only 8 places. So I have decided to not put the last one, that is the most recent, because you remember of your answer. But all the others, just to check, you have to evaluate the level of criticality from negligible to critical. We have now the curves that will synthesize normally what you have responded before. Only 4 people have answered at this step. It will be interesting to compare the two sides of the survey. So, seven people. It's longer to do, perhaps, on the phone, right? And you have to think each time, yes, indeed. So, at this step, we can see that the level of criticability when we do a mean is always on an average, but some of them are more near 4 and some of them are more near 2.5. It's the case of geographical variations that was less important than, for instance, the vagueness was strong. So there is a kind of link between, and coherence between your first answers and these answers. That's great. We are 22 now to have responded. It can be explored in detail, but 22, 3 or 4 are missing. I think it will not change a lot. So please continue to respond and to complete if you didn't finish. It will also be included in the paper. And that's also a way for me to say to you, to remind to you to write your name in the notes on your ideas, possible ideas of debate or mitigation solution that you have for all of these problems in the notes, and you will be invited to be co-author of the paper. And we can go out of the, I think that's the last one. So we can go back to the slides. Now the round table. So Anne-Sophie will present quickly. And I invite also people to come.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anne-Sophie Bage. I'm working at NRA, National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment. We are now going to start these panel discussions, whose objective is to talk about the following topics: produce comparable insight across disciplines while capturing local nuance. Discuss how obstacles appear across different domains and communities. And finally, compare severity ratings across contexts and examples. In order to carry out this panel discussion, we are face-to-face Alison, Romain, and Liz. Online? People online or not? Not, il n'y a personne. Okay.
But you can come and sit here.
It's okay? Romain?
Yes, sorry, I come back. You can stay with us. Please take a seat.
Yes.
So, about this round table, we have identified several hot topics, but if you have others, do not hesitate. So we have people that are here, others are in other session, and there were a problem, but it is a part of my fault. The sessions are in conflict for people that were on the panel, so we don't have everybody. But you are our panel. And today, about this 9 discrepancy, we would like to suggest to you different topics. So I will give to Alison and to Liz the first answer, what they think, and after you will react for each topic with your own experience. So don't be shy, just ask the microphone. There are 2 lovely persons over there that are ready to run for you, and after we will exchange. So the first topic is the sensitiveness. How sensitiveness is changing the impact, the effect, it cannot be impact only, of each of the obstacles that we have identified. That could be discussed. So first I will ask to Alison to say to us what are you thinking about sensitiveness and the impact of sensitiveness on the obstacles? It's difficult questions.
It is. Well, that's a difficult question.
We are not here to joke, eh?
No. I'm not quite sure I quite understand where you're coming from. This is a sensitive data group, I know, so that's quite important. So what aspect does sensitiveness of data have on the misinterpretation, or
no,
what do you mean? No.
I would say if we project that in your area, biodiversity, for instance, you have sensitiveness of data for biodiversity, so the place for endangered species.
Yes.
If you use some terms that are vague, for instance, NA, not available, that's an example.
All the time, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, well, we use NA when it's not available, or we apply a fuzziness in geospatial location so that the location of the particular object is not discoverable by others. How do you deal with that in data? Well, you've got a real conflict in hiding the data versus data discoverability for conservation. So exploitation versus conservation is the big issue, is that? I'm not helping here.
For instance, we can imagine if you have several terms to say that a species is perhaps here and perhaps not, because we are not sure of the observation, for instance, that's a discrepancy,
Yeah.
and it can be described by several words. Sorry.
Okay.
Difficult
I'm letting him down. Yeah, I mean, with endangered species or with, yes, it's normally a straight hiding business, I think. How would you describe them? Yeah, sorry. I think we can skip this one.
Okay.
Can anyone in the audience help me here? Because I'm not quite getting it. I'm an environmental scientist, so we always, basically, so we're always dealing with the conservation and preservation and or exploitation of a particular species. So you might record the data and you need to, for conservation purposes, to go back and see if it's disappeared next year or something like that. We need to record the data, and we need to record it in a safe way, but we need to hide a lot of that information from most people in the world, from discovery and particularly from AI. But that doesn't relate to semantics here and to the terminology we use per se. But I mean, one of the problems with biodiversity is that many species have pay no regard to national boundaries, particularly mobile species. For example, mobile birds, fish, whales, cetaceans, and even insects. And the trouble is you get different names for actual taxonomic common names for the individual in different countries. So you don't necessarily know, unless you've been working for a long time with that particular species or whatever, or with someone who's told you that in this country it's the same species, but, so it's still alive. So that's a particular problem for recording, because one country may record it in some.
So geographical discrepancy can also have a huge impact on this case.
Oh, it has a huge factor, and also, and that's one of the very important things with respect to conservation. And we had a classic case of a flamingo. The other thing is, of course, that different countries record the data on their natural heritage with different levels of diligence.
Yeah.
So you may have different levels of information, and that doesn't help in international conservation, as something that moves around the world.
So when you have a classification of risk, that plays also a role. If you have polysemy to determine a risk, if you have vagueness of the risk, you will not apply the measure on the same level on several places, right?
Yes, that's right. And of course the perspective. We have a question here though.
Yeah, please.
Is that okay now?
Yeah, indeed, as you want.
My name is Susanne Den Boer from the University of Copenhagen. I have to admit, I find it a bit difficult to understand your topic. Also, from where I'm coming, I'm working centrally in the administration of the university. But I just want to, and I think maybe this is a little off topic and not what you mean, but I have a problem with the word sensitive overall, and I can see that our researchers struggle between sensitive and confidential. And in Denmark, for example, we have the General Data Protection Regulation, so sensitive is often being used to refer to all personal data, but at the same time it's a subcategory of personal data, where you have normal personal data, sensitive personal data, confidential personal data. So the word sensitive and confidential, I think, is used intermixed. I don't know if that's at all relevant to what you were discussing now.
Brilliant.
No, but that's relevant, because the term itself, you say that there is vagueness and there is also polysemy.
So for us, we have revised our data classification model, where the typical information security classification model normally is CIA, confidentiality, integrity, accessibility. We actually have added the category sensitivity to actually pull the GDPR data out of the confidentiality and for us now, we talk about sensitivity only in the context of personal data and confidentiality in relation to other types of non-personal data because it's just total confusing. I don't know if that is all relevant to what you were discussing, but yeah, just mentioning.
Can I answer that briefly?
Yeah,
or not?
please.
I think what you've hit on is also that the domain in which you're collecting the data is absolutely vital and relevant to how you deal with it. So if you're talking about butterflies or crocodiles or whales, we're objectifying it as humans who collect data on them. Whereas I think you're talking about human data.
Well, any data. So from my perspective, what we want as an organization is that researchers classify their data and store and secure their data according to that classification. So to use it as a tool for information security measures, right?
So you're using the same classification across disciplines then?
So,
Wow,
I would like to add my stone in this conversation, just because I'm working for a research infrastructure that is called ERINA, working on highly pathogenic agents. And on sensitiveness, we have another definition again, just because it's linked to the risk and the dual use research concerns. That means that you can take the data, take the information and build a weapon, for instance. And that change also everything. And the level of risk that you have that are at low or negligible are critical in most of my case. So that means indeed that the vocabulary that you use will change everything. And after, we have to contextualize. That said, indeed, that's not because it is at a lower level or at a middle level that you have nothing to do. If there is something to do that is easy to do, why not to do it? And the discussion that we have here is important also to understand, okay, we are in a context, have we something to mitigate it? If we can make progress together and if we can converge, that's better. And indeed, the fact that in the perfect interoperability does not exist because we have in parallel all these squares that are different. For instance, in our case, the access to the data that you have described, it's simple. On our place, you have no access. That means that the level of risk, you can't compare them between countries because they don't have the same laws, they don't have the same rules. And even if there are rules that are lower, sometimes it's not authorized just because they decide. So, indeed, after describing things with the same word, can permit to qualify the risk at the same level, and that's sometimes the key to aggregate data. For instance, for the COVID-19 and for future other pandemic, if we do not aggregate this kind of data about pandemic situation, that could be a disaster. That was my 2 cents about that. Other remark or comment about sensitiveness?
Yeah, can I comment on this?
Yes? Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, Lise, my apologies.
No, it was good because this example is something that I wanted to bring up as well, because I'm here to represent the discipline of data stewardship. And with sensitive data, the first thing that came to my mind was data governance, and especially in, let's say, cross-country bigger projects, having to make sure that the organizations that are collaborating understand each other at data governance level and use the terms around data governance in the same way. And your example reminded me, I'm based in Italy, and I work in Italian and in English. And sensitive data is a term that in Italian, dati sensitivi, they have 2 different meanings. sensitive data and data sensitivity have two different legal meanings. But they sound so similar that they become interchangeable in everyday discourse, even though they have somewhat of a different legal meaning, especially before GDPR, actually. And that was for legal interoperability between projects, for example, something that one had to be very, very careful about, that everybody was talking about special categories of personal data and not personal data in general, for example. But also for data governance more in general, to understand very clearly who is a data steward, for example, or who is a data owner. So have a clear, unequivocal definition of those roles between different partners engaging in a project with sensitive data. It's something that can derail a project or delay a project quite a long time if it's not discussed early on.
So perhaps it's a good introduction to one of the points that we have here. The stakeholders that play a major role for mitigation of each issue. What is your opinion on that?
Could you ask the question again?
The question is, for you, what are the stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders, that play a major role for mitigating each issue?
Well, my answer is always data stewards, but
but not only. If data stewards are alone, do they do the work?
Not only data stewards, it's also because data steward itself is a very contextual term and is not necessarily understood the same way everywhere. But for me to start clarifying terminologies, I think for any interdisciplinary collaborative project is the first step, and whether it's the researchers making sure that they speak the same language, even if that language is English, but that they use the terms in the same way, or at the organizational level that the roles that people from one organization engage with their counterpart, that they understand that they do actually the same thing, even if they're both called data stewards, that they actually should be talking to each other, and it's not that a data steward should be talking to a data manager or that a data steward should be talking to a data librarian, because that's actually the people who should be talking to each other.
I think you're going too far to get to the data steward. You've really got to talk to the researchers and try and explain to them how important this kind of terminology is, particularly if you're in a multidisciplinary project, and really the responsibility lies with them. And to a large extent, we have a session tomorrow morning, a co-located session. The researchers need to understand much more what is required to save their precious data for the causes that they have, and I've been talking about the conservation of species, for example, but there are other things, water, all sorts of, zoonotic diseases. If you're a researcher who's collecting information, particularly across some of these disciplinary or geographic boundaries, where you come across inherent different languages that have traditions that may go back, that have been generated in a few hundred years at least, then if they want to solve this problem, which they usually have their eyes on, which is why they're doing their work, they've got to... and most of them will understand the need to aggregate or to compare data. That's why they're kind of doing their work quite often. And so they've got to have a dialogue with the data repository in some way, or their data manager. We had the data steward, the data manager, the person who's responsible for enabling, the data enabler. Maybe that's a new term, the data enabler.
We don't need a new term.
You don't need a new term, no. But yeah, I think it's got, a lot of it has to be the responsibility of the research community. And
no, I completely agree with that. Obviously researchers have a lot to do, but I think the moment where organizations also get involved, also there has to be this interoperability at an organizational level.
Endless government department committees that sit there and go, oh yes, we're in some particular health committee or something, and we'll, yes, to try to synchronise some of that work. And also, you know, right, we're in France, say, and there's this zoonotic disease coming across from North Africa, South America to North America here. We've got malaria that comes in from the north. We're interested in solving this problem, therefore a dialogue has to happen, and therefore advocacy from party to party is going to be vital. Someone put down a marketer, didn't they, in that sales agent? Yeah, we need sales agents.
Thank you. Do you have any reaction in the room or question to ask to panelists? No, so we can, yes, I see over there.
I think the main issue is that terminologies are not really available, and the awareness of different terminologies. Yeah. So, and of course, there's also lack of these services. Yeah. So, and probably this has also discussed here within the group. Yeah. So, where I can find my terminology? What can I or should I apply? So, and then it's quite clear. You have a definition, and you have also a decision or reference to a dedicated term.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any other reaction?
I think it's also community adoption of those terminologies. So even if they are available, so because, for example, coming back to the example of data stewardship, we do start to get, you know, commonly agreed upon definitions of who is a data steward, but those definitions are superimposed on a landscape where we have people who have, for all intents and purposes, fulfilled the function of a data steward for years already, and are, you know, finding out maybe this morning that, oh, I'm a data steward now. But they have been, all this time, they have been, you know, they've had the job title already, they've called themselves somebody. And so you have terminologies, but how they're implemented can still be quite difficult.
Thank you. Any other reaction on that? If not, yes?
Yeah. And
sorry, I don't see with all the light.
It's Magdalena, Gdańsk University of Technology. And follow up what you said, Lizzie, about terminology adoption. We have this language issue, because even if we agree something in the community, we are from different countries. And for example, sometimes, like my case, it's very hard to adopt the English terminology, even if it's agreed by the most of us. I have to go to other stakeholders, and they need this translation. And sometimes even data steward in Polish, it's something like a data caretaker, something like that.
Yeah, well, that was the problem we had.
Yes, completely different meaning. Yeah.
Yes, and often they're untranslatable, really. I'm interested at the comment over there by the gentleman. Is there a belief that certain people should get together and create a vocabulary and definitions, and everyone should look to that? Somehow they should know it exists, and everyone should comply with a community of practice. In our experience, from the semi-researcher come data custodian or data interested party perspective, very few researchers are interested in helping create a vocabulary for their discipline or their practice. Very small percentage. So do we sit around creating vocabularies, which has happened, which is great, those few people, and then you've got to get the adoption or get the community acceptance back again. And I was interested in the domains that set up. We did a survey in Australia back years ago at the Ecological Society conference, We had 700 people who responded to the survey. Of the ecologists, we had about 70 different types of ecologist. I'm a marine ecologist, I'm an animal ecologist, I'm an invertebrate ecologist. How do you engage with your, the small group that has been diligent enough, and I'm in that group, to try to define a vocabulary, and then you go out. And that's what I meant about marketing. How do you make that community, the community of practice has to adopt, but that's actually a big step, and we're very arrogant if we do it without the actual community of practice, in the long term, I think. So there's my controversial point for today.
So before we wrap up, we have perhaps the time for one last remark question. Is there somebody who wants to add something? Yes, Chris.
Please.
No, sorry. I think it's if you create a vocabulary or controlled vocabulary, in the end it takes ages. Yeah. So really to find the common sense, and otherwise. So and I like also this discussion we had before or the day before on this federated system of terminologies, for example. So you have a kind of technology relation and. For different terminologies, yeah, you published on your own demand probably. It's I think this technology will help a lot. Yeah. And the other thing or property I would mention is also a controlled vocabulary. It's not written in stone. It's also, it should be maintained, and that's why these kind of characteristics on versioning and status, it's quite important, but it's not really existing in the end.
Mm. Interesting point. Thank you. So. We have 3 minutes left, so I propose to try to summarize, but if you think I have forgotten some ideas, you have the link to the collaborative notes, where you can add your names and your email, and also add your ideas about all these points that are here, like which terminologies, issues create great barriers in your context, how these issues affect data quality, fairness, or collaborations. Which stakeholders should we engage to address each issue in your context, for instance? And if there are existing framework or existing glossaries or vocabularies that could be reused or harmonized for data management that is used in your community, that is, that there is a CASRAI work that is now maintained by Codata, that is a base, but sometimes there are pre-existing vocabularies existing, for instance, in the astronomy community with virtual organizations, and they are managing things for a long time, and that are not the same between disciplinaries. They will always coexist, even if we have a central base. They will continue to have discrepancy, and the question is where we have to converge, where we have to take care of the context, and where we have to try to invent new terms. That was, for instance, the case for semantic artifact. Semantic artifact 10 years ago was not existing, but it was just because the vocabularies, terminologies, etc. were used for one or for the other, and it was never the same concept behind. So, indeed, we will not solve that. But what we propose in this paper is to try to design this checklist on how I can see the relative effect, not impact, but effect of these obstacles, how it can make the science better or not, and how we choose to mitigate them or not. And for that, I hope that you will be happy to participate. And we will organize a webinar with the same kind of exercise, but also open discussions. Thank you, everybody. It's now 30 seconds left. Just the time to say to you enjoy the last session that is coming.